Welcome back to our special coverage of the coronavirus pandemic. Now, the Palestinian Authority sent a scathing letter to the United Nations Security Council this week, accusing Israel of intentionally spreading coronavirus in the Palestinian territories. This after the UN's envoy to the Middle East actually praised Israeli-Palestinian cooperation in battling the pandemic. I-24 News senior U.S. correspondent in New York, Mike Wagenheim, talked with Israel's ambassador to the UN, Danny Danon, who is now warning the PA that if they keep inciting against Israel, they may be on their own in the war against COVID-19.
Actually, there is cooperation between us, the Israelis, and the Palestinians. We work together to fight the coronavirus. The pandemic, it doesn't recognize borders or lines, so we have to work together. So we actually supported the Palestinians with equipment, with training, and we are continuing to do it. But what is happening in the last few days, that the Palestinian leadership, unfortunately, they continue to incite against Israel. So in one hand, they receive the support that we give them, and we encourage other countries to support them, and we allow everything that is being donated to them to come directly into Gaza and the West Bank. But at the same time, they are inciting, they are sending letters. On this coming Thursday, we're going to have a debate in the Security Council. We're going to do it remotely like we are talking now. And I'm going to say very clearly to my colleagues in the Security Council, it is about time for the Palestinians to decide whether they want to save lives of Palestinians or they want to continue with the Israel bashing. It is unfortunate, but I don't think we can be quiet about it. Because when you hear what they are saying, those are anti-Semitic allegations, calling our boys and girls who are protecting Palestinians and Israelis today, they are blaming them for spreading the virus. It reminds me dark ages when people blamed the Jews for spreading diseases. We cannot accept it, and it's coming from President Abbas and all of the leadership of the Palestinians. They have to decide what they want to do. We will not continue with our support if they will continue with those allegations. The U.S. decided to donate $5 million. In Israel, we were thinking to do more to the Palestinians, to support them. We will not do it if they will not stop immediately with those lies. And I told them, we can wait few weeks and then continue to fight. But now we have to fight together, and we have seen it all around the world. When you see that you have areas of conflict, people are putting aside the arguments and are coming together. Unfortunately, the Palestinian leaders are not capable of doing it.
Well, let's go now to New York and our senior U.S. correspondent, Mike Wagenheim. Mike, you would hope that the United Nations, in a situation that really requires global cooperation, would be addressing that, not falling back into familiar patterns. But how is the U.S. even functioning now under the current circumstances, and what can we expect from it?
It's really difficult for the UN to function right now on a day-to-day basis, and much of their activities revolve around coronavirus coordination, testing, medical supplies, trying to get them to areas that need it, and much less on the day-to-day minutia of diplomacy. What we usually see going on, the building is pretty much shut down. Meetings are done virtually. Diplomacy is a game that's best done in close quarters, eye-to-eye dealings that are done with handshakes, dealings that are done face-to-face, and it's much more difficult to get any kind of deals done when you're dealing with Zoom, when you're dealing with Skype, when you're just not there face-to-face. So the everyday stuff that usually goes on, the drama at the UN, it's kind of cast aside at this point. I think Danny Danon will be speaking to the choir for the first time in a long time tomorrow when he says enough of just the bashing, enough of the political drama. Let's put it aside. Let's make sure lives are saved rather than the usual Israeli-Palestinian nonsense that comes to the UN's door once a month.
Right. Hopefully that will be the case. And Mike, another issue that will a political issue that will likely come to the UN this summer with this new Israeli government is the plan to perhaps annex some West Israeli settlements in the West Bank. Did Ambassador Danon address that?
He did. He said, first off, it's about time that Israel has a functioning government again. But secondly, that everything that will be done in terms of applying sovereignty or annexation, depending on your political viewpoint, to the West Bank, Judea and Samaria, will be done in coordination with the United States. But U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo saying, you know what? It's all up to the Israelis. Hear what's Listen to what he had to say earlier today on the topic of applying sovereignty, annexation of the West Bank. Let's give it a listen.
As for the annexation of the West Bank, the Israelis will ultimately make those decisions. That's an Israeli decision, and we will work closely with them to share with them our views of this in a private setting.
You know, that's what the U.S. has to say now, but who knows what comes in November with the presidential election coming up. I actually spoke with Joel Rubin, who is the founding political director of the left-leaning J Street and worked in the Obama administration. J Street issued an endorsement of Joe Biden, Obama's VP. Rubin also worked furiously on getting the Iran nuclear accord done, which could be a premier issue between Biden and Trump in the upcoming campaign. Here's what Rubin had to say first about annexation, sovereignty, and also about what Biden might do about the Iran nuclear accord that has fallen apart since he left the White House. Let's give it a listen. Here's Joel Rubin.
The nod to the Trump peace plan is almost laughable at this stage because there is no peace process that President Trump's promoting. It's an annexation plan primarily, and that I think is going to get into some hot water here politically as well as potentially in Israel. But nobody has confidence in Jared Kushner, who right now is apparently in charge of our response to the coronavirus, is going to be able to do anything on Middle East peace. What needs to happen is we need to see a way for the Trump administration to get the Palestinians to the table and to get the Israelis to back off of annexation. That's at least a somewhat of a decent baseline start that they should be moving towards. But until that happens, nobody here is going to have confidence beyond perhaps Jared Kushner and a couple of folks at the White House that they're moving towards anything known as peace.
Where do you see Biden winding up in terms of his positions on Israel, which have long been established, but now he's heading into a serious and deep presidential campaign?
Well, Joe Biden is a realist. Joe Biden is someone who stands for American national security, and he was, as vice president, an incredibly strong advocate for the Iran nuclear deal. He supports and has supported for decades the two-state solution. He got into a bit of a kerfuffle about a decade ago when he was in Israel, and Netanyahu announced a settlement expansion. Didn't go very well in terms of how it went well from my perspective, but it was a pretty intense reaction from Vice President Biden. Then I think he's going to look at this and all the problems that we have right now globally and how the Trump administration is pulled out from global leadership across the board. And he's going to take a position that is aligned with where American Jews are, which is support for Israel, support for peace, support for diplomacy. And that's going to be something where he's going to have a lot of backing when he goes into the White House in January.
You know, Mike, hearing that makes it a little more understandable why Prime Minister Netanyahu especially wanted to address that annexation issue this summer, well before that November election.
No doubt he's going to try to get it done. But keep in mind, even the language of the coalition agreement, Khaled, between Netanyahu and Gantz has squishy language in there. It's not just we're running full force toward annexation, toward applying sovereignty. We're going to do it with regional considerations in mind, with the strategic interests of the state of Israel in mind. So it's not as simple. I think Benny Gantz wants to pull back a little bit, make sure the peace treaty with Jordan is not jeopardized in any way, make sure things are done procedurally, that the White House knows everything that's going on and isn't caught off guard. So we might see a little tussle, not just between the White House and the Democrats and the Netanyahu administration, but also within this coalition agreement between Netanyahu and Gantz as well.
And indeed, we would also likely to see a tussle in Washington, if it would be a Biden administration, between some other elements, either with the Democrats or with Republicans. Certainly, it will be a very dramatic change in policy, given the nature of how the Trump administration has taken some unprecedented moves over the last 4 years. Mike Wagenheim in New York, thank you for joining us.